You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game, and we will be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because we have Adam Andrzejewski. This man ran for governor in 2010. He almost pulled off the biggest upset of the decade. That's right. Got 15% of the vote, and the winner got, what, 22%?
It was a little less than that. I think they were about 20, 21%.
Yeah, so and he may be running again. We'll find out in about 25 seconds. That is, he may be running for governor, he may run for some other statewide office, but in between, for the last few years, he's been running, he co-founded For the Good of Illinois. You can find more about it at forthegoodofillinois.org, or you can find more about it, what is that, Open Secrets? No.
Openthebooks.com.
Openthebooks.com. Every dime online, that was your slogan, right?
When I ran for governor of Illinois, that was the promise. And at openthebooks.com, I'm probably the only guy in American political history to fulfill a campaign promise. We're getting very close to putting every single dime taxed and spent at all 7,000 units of government on the website.
So they call it transparency, and you want to be transparent, so are you running for governor in 2014?
Well, I'm clearly interested, Jeff. We did better than most people expected in the last run, and fulfilling my campaign promise, I think that's significant. I've got 111,000 votes in the last race. On my email list since my race, we've doubled our email list up to about 60,000 people on the email list. We've got supporters all over the state, and when I travel across the state, they frequently express that they want the opportunity to vote for me again. So I'm clearly interested in the race. It's a big state, it's a big race, and we're trying to dot every I and cross every T.
Well, we're taping this, folks, on December 15th, year 2012. Now, you want to dot every I and cross every T before you make your decision? Is that what you're saying?
Sure. I mean,
or have you made your decision and you're just being coy? Because, you know, you might as well announce it on Public Affairs. I mean, seriously, we're going to
Maybe I come back and
I think
we'll do that,
you know, we're going to be trying to be airing before Christmas, and you know, we're taping on the 15th. Let's get the word out. I mean, what the heck? Are you running?
Well, look, first off, I think we have to perform and fulfill the promises. So right now, we're trying, one of the last tranches of data that we need on openthebooks.com is the state's checkbook. And so we have 10 years at the federal level, where Barack Obama gave us 10 years. We got 10 years from the city of Chicago, where Rahm Emanuel came in with a beautiful database and checkbook of the city of Chicago. We've got every single school district all the way back to 2006, every single college and university all the way back to 2006. We've filed 7,000 requests. This has been a massive project and a lot of work.
And
we've got about three-quarters of those units. But I just want to complete this.
And when do you complete it by?
Well, we need the state's checkbook to complete the project.
Well, just call up Governor Pat Quinn. Seriously, Pat.
We did something a little better. We filed the request with Republican Comptroller Judy Bartopinka, and she rejected the request.
Judy, you rejected the request? Why? Come tell me. Why aren't you here when I need you? What did she say?
She actually said it in the response that a couple of employees would have to work up to 3 days to fulfill the request, and that was an undue burden. And we think that that is wrong. It's in violation of the Freedom of Information Act.
To fulfill the request, to give you the information, to put every dime online for the state of Illinois, meaning every expenditure. Is that what I mean by every dime online?
The state's checkbook, and
their checkbook. They write checks. Judy writes checks.
Right.
She walks shopping down Michigan Avenue. She says, "I want that dress." No, she doesn't. Judy, we're just kidding. But she does write checks, and she decides she's got to give some money for Medicaid if you have to pay a doctor.
Right.
Judy signs the check.
There's fund accounts, there's purchase order numbers, there's check numbers, there's dates, there's vendor
numbers. It's all
numbers.
there, right? She's keeping a checkbook.
Well,
Judy.
It was for the city of Chicago. Within 5 days, it was beautiful.
They
5
gave it
discs
to you.
showed
They
up,
gave it to you all.
Federal Express, everything.
Mayor
10
Rahm
years of that.
Emanuel.
Absolutely.
Even though people say he's not really mayor, he's more an emperor. But he gave it to you, right?
Well, he opened the
I
books.
only say this. I only say this because look, I used to be on the media list. You know, they have a media list in the city of Chicago. It's a slight digression, but it's important for transparency. If you get on the media list, they let you know the next day where Rahm will be, if you want to go to a press conference, and so forth. I mean, Rahm was right here 8 years ago. Rahm, 10 years ago. Do you remember 2002 when you were just a little guy? You were running for Congress, okay? Just a little guy. And so you came on Public Affairs, and he did twice. 2002, before he was elected, 2003 after. So the thing is, I was going to the media things, I was going to press conferences, and I fell off the list. Imagine that. I just fell off the list. So I called Andy. We don't work with last names there. So I called Andy in the media office for the city of Chicago. Could you put me back on the list? He said, well, send the request, and I did. And it's been 2 weeks. Andy, could you put me on the list? Because you know what? I don't think, Andy, you work for Rahm. No. Who does he work for? If he's working for the city of Chicago, who does he work for?
He works for us.
You and all the taxpayers. And you know what? If it's government power, if it's government money, then it has to be used properly.
That's right.
If it's used for political purposes, like to penalize somebody that you may not like, well, don't you just walk down the street to 219 South Dearborn and say to the U.S. Attorney, get your ass in gear. Go look at what he's doing.
So
right?
we were actually really good about the request. First, we asked for 3 years. Then she rejected that. They narrowed it to a year. They gave that response that I talked about just on the year. But then we followed the process, and this has been over the course of the last 6 and 7 months. We filed a request with the Public Access Counselor at the Attorney General's office. So now we've got the top law enforcement officer in Illinois, Lisa Madigan, on the case. Mm-hmm. And she says, yes, you have a good case, and she opened up a file on it. Right. And then for about 4 or 5 months, no return phone calls, no return emails. We cannot get a response out of the Attorney General.
Wait, and for what? To get this checkbook?
Correct.
From Judy Bart Topinka?
This is true.
So is this part of the Madigan-Topinka combine? John Cass, get right on it, because he said there's a combine,
This is a
Republicans, Democrats working together to deny what's the public's due, right?
And this is a settled issue amongst the people of Illinois. It's a 95% settled issue.
Settled issue? Meaning?
That's right, that the checkbook is public information.
95%, but there's 5% out there that maybe they can deny you this legally.
Well, because they're in on the game.
Okay.
Right. So
that's what you're waiting for. Once you get that checkbook, you put it online, you said you fulfilled your promise, and then you can tell me you're running for governor. Is that it?
Well, we'll come back and announce on the show. That's for sure,
okay.
Jeff. Now, it's interesting on this specific circumstance, because in 2009, Lisa Madigan's signature piece of legislation is the rewrite of the Freedom of Information Act law. So how is Lisa Madigan going to come in on this? Right now, she is forestalling us from getting the checkbook through her non-response. So we just may have to run for governor of Illinois to force the checkbook open.
This is going to be a major issue on your part, is that right?
Well, look, I take my promises very seriously, and I follow through on those promises. And business owners all over the state, when the state calls, when the Department of Revenue calls, the Department of Labor, when OSHA calls them, when the sales tax inspectors show up, their books are open. They immediately jump through hoops. They go through all kinds of costs with lawyers and accountants to properly respond to the state, and they get back to them on a timely basis. It's been 7 months. They are unwilling, Madigan and Topinka, they are unwilling to show us where they're simply spending our money.
Well, what could the taxpayers do? Could they call up Judy Bart Topinka? I mean, they're taping this on the 15th. People will be watching it the week of the 17th. Could they call up Judy Bart Topinka, the state comptroller, and say, Judy, we'd like to see this? Could they call up Attorney General Lisa Madigan? You have those numbers handy?
I don't have them top of mind, but this is exactly why
where
For the Good of
Illinois exists. If they go to your
exists.
website, can they find out what to do to follow up on this? I mean, you need some help here, right?
You know what? We'll post that on our website,
you will.
where people can
How to
call
contact
both of those
Lisa
numbers.
Madigan, the Attorney
Absolutely.
General, how to
Right.
contact Comptroller Judy Bart Topinka. Hey folks, Lisa, would you like to appear and discuss this? We're fair and balanced. Come on the show. We'll talk about it. Judy Bart Topinka, Comptroller Topinka, you know, you've been on the show before when you were a treasurer. There's nobody more fair than Berkowitz. You know that. Come on the show. We'll talk about it.
Right, and this is exactly why I founded For the Good of Illinois back in 2007, to give citizens the tools to hold their elected officials accountable. And politicians in Illinois, simply, they want to operate in the dark.
Switching gears slightly, we're taping this on December 15th. On December 14th, there was a shooting in Connecticut. I believe 28 people were killed, 20 children, I think 20 children, in the school, what's it called, Newtown? Sandy Hook Elementary School. So if you watch the programs discussing this on MSNBC, maybe on Fox, maybe on CNN, what you hear is a lot of discussion, boy, we got to put a stop to this. This is terrible. Well, folks, you're not going to get an argument here. You get 28 people killed in cold blood. Yes, this is terrible. We need to put a stop to it. The question is, for a man who may be running for governor, and you may have something to say about it, what do we do? How do we put a stop to this?
I think first off, it's a very sad situation. I have an 8-year-old girl, a 6-year-old girl, and a 4-year-old girl. It's every parent's worst nightmare. My wife and I, seeing the newscast last night, we spent 20 minutes praying for the families affected by this right ahead of the holidays here. It's a very, very sad situation. And Jeff, I actually don't know what government can do. I think this has to come down on a person-to-person basis. With churches, with charities.
Wait a second, we got some facts.
Really
I know
sure.
it's premature, but if you've been following this, we don't have for sure facts, but it appears that the person who did this, it appears that he walked in and killed his mother to start it out. His mother was a sub teacher at that school. He took her guns, which were legally owned by her. So these were not guns that were gotten illegally, they were gotten legally. I guess you could say illegally, he stole the guns. They weren't his. He walked in the school. He killed 28 people. My guess is none of those people was packing. None of those people was armed. Now, if, I'm looking over here at, Lawrence Adelson, okay? My great floor director here. What if, the thing is, I know Larry, he's a smart guy, and he's a civil guy, and he's a reasonable guy. But, what if somebody walked in here, okay? Just say, and we tape here at the Comcast Skokie studio. So what if somebody walked in here and they had a gun and they had something against you and me and everybody else, and they started shooting up? Now, what could we do to stop them? We could call the police, but no way they'd get there in time. And now I don't know Larry that well, but he's a smart lawyer, he's an intelligent guy, and he's a reasonable guy. In a state like Illinois, he could be packing as soon as the law is changed, because we just passed, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals said, Illinois, you can't do what you're doing. You can basically not say that nobody, can carry a gun, concealed carry. Because there's a right of self-defense in your home that extends to outside, right? Mm-hmm. So, if Larry were packing, so to speak, if he had a concealed carry, if he had a gun, or any of my other people who volunteer for the show, and folks, if you're not volunteering for public affairs, get in touch with me at jbcg@aol.com because we'd like to have your help. But, the thing is, now you take that example, we'd like some safety here. I don't know, you could be packing, I could be. The thing is, if you're a guy who's going to start shooting it up, you don't know. And although even that guy killed himself after, okay, so maybe he didn't value his life that much, but nevertheless, he might have thought he couldn't even accomplish his insanity of killing 20 kids and 8 adults. If he thought, you, Adam Andrzejewski, my floor director, somebody else on the staff here might be packing, because you never know. And then he'd be blown away before he did anything. And if there were a teacher at the school in Sandy Hook Elementary, I think, if there were a principal and they were packing, maybe they could have because they were killed. I think the principal was killed. I think there may have been some teachers killed. Apparently, I don't think they were packing. Maybe they could have prevented many, if not all, of those deaths. So I ask you, Adam Andrzejewski, is that the takeaway from Sandy Hook Elementary School? That number one, Illinois should have a concealed carry. The Seventh Circuit has said. Lisa Madigan, I think, as of December 15th, hasn't said whether she's going to fight that. Mm-hmm. Should she fight it? And if she doesn't, should the Illinois legislature get going soon and get a concealed carry law? And should they exempt schools? Or should they say, if you're in the schools, you have a right to concealed carry too? Because in case somebody wants to start doing a shoot 'em up at the school, we want them to wonder whether the principal, maybe, superintendent has got a gun. Is that a good idea?
Well, I think there's a lot on the table with that question, and it's a serious issue right now. So, for instance, at the high school in Elmhurst, Illinois, they actually have on-site law enforcement. They have, when kids come in, they have a special section that they screen everybody through. Anybody that that they don't know or that is a guest of the school then goes and gets hall passes and guest passes. It's a very effective there's a semblance of control there. So I think maybe that's one of the takeaways.
Say that again. What's the semblance of control?
Well, there's on-site law enforcement, and everyone gets checked through a holding area in the morning at the Elmhurst High School.
Oh, at the Elmhurst High School.
Correct, right. So that
They
might
have
be one
on-site
area.
law
Right.
enforcement. They've got a private security officer, or they've got an Elmhurst police officer there?
I'm not sure about that, but I think it is a public police officer that has an office there, and that's the system.
And he checks every person who walks through the school to see if they've got a gun?
Well, that's the control process they use, and I don't know the details beyond that, but I can.
Does he have a gun? Does that person have a gun?
Yes,
He does. So if somebody were to walk in there with a gun, not only could he find out because they go through the metal detector. Is that what you're saying, essentially? They go through some kind
I
of screening.
assume they have metal detectors, but they do have screening right there with an armed law enforcement officer in a special area that everyone has to pass through.
Okay. And you think that's sufficient, so it wouldn't bother you in the least if Illinois passed a concealed carry law that said concealed carry is now the law of the law in Illinois. Say they said something in terms of training you would have to get, how many classes you would have to get, how many you
Right,
might
and
have to
Illinois
pass
is
a
the
test.
last state, I think,
so
in
you'd
the
have to.
union.
Not
Right.
everybody could carry a gun. You'd have to pass various tests to show you were qualified to possess the gun, to shoot the gun if necessary.
Sure.
But you're saying we maybe should exempt and say you couldn't take that gun in there if you were a teacher, if you're a principal or a student. Concealed carry, in other words, is not apply. Your right for concealed carry wouldn't extend to going into a public school.
Well, I'm not writing the legislation, but I
But
think
if you were,
looked around the states,
if you were, I'm going to put you on the spot, and you might be governor of the state sometime. As of now, with the information you have, would you advise the legislature to exempt schools, or would you say? You say, concealed carry, if you want concealed carry, you should be able to do that if you are a teacher or a principal or something.
I think law enforcement has to be consulted on how these things are best designed. And I think over the course of time, as we learn more and more about these fraying instances on the edges of our culture and society, that we have to put all of best practices forward.
So you're not sure?
I think we have to have a two-way conversation with law enforcement, with the education establishment, with parents, and iron some of these details out.
And what about John, just regular citizen?
Well, I think
Does he have a
citizens
say
need.
too? I mean,
Absolutely.
okay.
I mentioned that. Women and families and men, the fastest growing constituency arming themselves right now are women between the ages of 40 and 60, and that's because they feel unsafe.
And because if they're in an unsafe area, they may be a little less safe than a man. They may be, on average, I don't want to be sexist here, on average, a female may be somewhat shorter, on average, maybe somewhat less strong. A gun is what we call an equalizer. If you're walking down an alley and it's dark and it's unsafe, and some guy's coming at you and he's big, and he may have a gun, well, you know what? If you've got a gun in your purse, it's an equalizer.
My wife's 5 foot tall on a good day. She's redheaded, she's Irish, but against a bad man, the only thing that's going to equalize that uneven power relationship is a firearm.
And you favor concealed carry?
I do.
Okay.
And I have a unique perspective on that. I grew up downstate in a small town in Herscher, Illinois, where we hunt and fished and trapped, and so also for protection. But I spent 10 years in the city of Chicago and understand the need for personal protection.
Rahm Emanuel doesn't seem to favor concealed carry at all. He was very upset about the Seventh Circuit opinion. Rahm, why don't you come on the show and talk about it? At least you could do is, Rahm, tell Andy to put me on the list so I can get him to ask a question in the press conference, okay? You can't be afraid of me, Rahm. I mean, you were just here, right? A few years ago, sitting right in this table. So, but Rahm says it's all terrible. Oh, it's awful. They've got concealed carry. And he says, look, I mean, you can't even get a cell phone, he says, in some courts because they think, courtrooms, they think you take pictures of witnesses, and yet you've got a right to have a concealed carry. Does that analogy make any sense to you? I mean, you think Rahm has a point there? He says, okay, this cell phone, you can't take that into some courtrooms, but you can take a gun into what? I don't know, into a building because you've got a right to concealed carry.
Well, I think it's pretty much settled law now from the courts on forward that you have constitutional rights.
So Rahm lost on that one.
I think so.
I mean, what's what I'm going to say if we have concealed carry here, and let's say the murder rate goes down, the robbery rate goes down, more guns, less crime. What are you going to say, Rahm? You don't know. Well, come on the show, Rahm. I mean, this is so difficult having one-way conversations,
Well, we're having a gainful two-way conversation.
What would Rahm say? What do you think?
Rahm's got to make his own case.
All right.
It's not my case.
So the other burning issue here, it's all about the economy, right?
Sure.
If you're running for governor.
Absolutely.
the
Somebody's
economy.
got to advocate on behalf of taxpayers in this state.
What about pension reform? I mean, what can you tell us about the
I think people-
state employee pensions? Do they need to be reformed, or should we just say it's okay? And some people say just raise taxes. They say, damn it, you made this, it's an obligation.
first of all, let's
Use
talk
it,
about the
keep
problem.
obligations.
Yep.
$200 billion in underfunding or so.
That's right. I'm glad to hear you use that number. I've been talking
200
about that
billion.
number for about the last year and a half. You know, in the papers, it's only printed now at 98 billion, but the real problem is 200 billion. Now, I took a look at the gross domestic product of the state of Illinois last year, and it was 644 billion. So this is
Wow.
the problem. The 5 pensions at the state level are a third of everything, all the goods
All
and
the output.
services produced in an entire year by the entire economy.
Wow.
That's the scope of the problem in Illinois.
And the problem, too, on an annual basis, if you think about it, you'd know this, people often say what the budget for the state of Illinois, the general revenue fund budget, is what, would you say 33 billion? Does that sound right?
Well, if you add the federal numbers in there.
No,
and
but
things
that's
that,
like
right.
55 or
I was
something.
sitting
Just
down
for
with a
moment,
banker
okay,
in Champaign,
okay.
and he said, and I walked him through those numbers,
Right.
and he was aghast, and he said, "What's the budget in the state of Illinois?" And I said, "Well, you know, depending on what numbers you look at, if you had the federal numbers in there, you know, 53, 54, 55, 56, you know, give or take $1 billion, right?" And he said, "Stop there. It's unsustainable."
But even if you take, and that includes capital projects, it includes money that the state gets from the feds and then spends, right?
Well, we're actually.
It does include federal money that
The capital
taxpayers-
budgets are separate
The
from
state
what I just
taxpayers.
said, yeah.
You say in addition to the 55 billion, is that right? You sure
Right,
of that?
so the capital bill passed in 2009. That would be in addition to the state
You're saying the
budget
state
numbers
of
that I
Illinois,
talked
so
about.
because, then maybe I'm wrong, because people tell me the main budget to think about is the general revenue, GRF, right?
Sure.
And that's about $33 billion.
Right,
They
that
say
is
that's the operating
state-raised,
budget.
right, that's the state-raised
my point.
revenue,
Okay. So let's
taxed and spent
Let's
here.
stick to that just for a second to take this point. The pension payment last year, when the general revenue fund budget, I think that's for fiscal 2012, 2013, was about $33 billion. How much was the pension payment that was made? That is the state of Illinois. How much did they put into state employee pensions?
I think that payment was approximately $6.1 million. It took
6.1
every
what?
dime of the
I think you said million. You
67
didn't mean to say
billion.
billion,
I said billion.
with a B.
It took every
Okay.
dime of the 67% income tax hike. It
Right.
went to the pensions. It did not go to pay the bills.
Okay, but so $33 billion is spent, including that $6 billion tax increase, and $6 billion of that $33 billion, or about 20%, goes to paying people who are retirees, right? It's either for debt service for that or payments to those people. And so then you start asking, well, what's available for education? Not increases in education, just to cover your education costs of the state of Illinois.
It's crowding
What's
out-
available for health care?
Absolutely.
So you're right. So the
Right.
people now who are fighting here, it's not a matter of, it's taxpayers, it's people who are recipients of the benefits of spending on education and of health care and on law enforcement, and then the retirees. So you're weighing it and you say, do you spend it on education and health care and needy people here? Do you consider the taxpayers not a burden, or do you give it all to the state employees?
Right, you cannot get a child educated if you're funding an education bureaucracy. You can't run a prison if you're funding a prison bureaucracy. So all of these different things, pensions
Adam,
and
what's the
salaries
solution?
are crowding
What's
out
the
social
solution?
services.
What do you do here? You're governor now.
Well, first of
forget
all-
whether you're running. We know
right.
he's running, folks. I know he's going to run. So we'll eliminate that. But so now I'm making you hypothetically the governor of the state of Illinois right now. I don't know, something happened to Pat Quinn. We couldn't get him on the show, so he's out of here. So as of December 15th, it's Adam Andrzejewski, now the governor of the state of Illinois. What would you do today? And what would you ask the legislature to do to deal with this pension problem?
Right, so everything is on the table. People have to work a little bit longer, pay in a little bit more, and have a little bit less lucrative cost of living adjustment or the elimination of the COLA. Plus, you've got to put all of the legal corruptions, like the Chicago Tribune said, every single private employee, and there's private employees in these associations and nonprofit organizations that are muscled in to the government's pension plan. They're not even working for government. The taxpayer has no control over their salary.
Give us some
and
idea,
we're on the
though.
hook for their government pension.
Some idea of what kind of pensions are some of these folks getting? Can you give us some idea?
Some of the largest in all 5 state
What's
pension
this guy's
systems.
name? I think we were talking before the show. Very large payment. What does he have to do now? He had something. He was investigating something that happened 8 years ago.
Okay, well so on our portal at openthebooks.com, we have all of the pay and pensions of virtually every single public employee at every level of Illinois government. So when the story broke a couple weeks ago on the Daily Nephew being indicted by Dan Webb, the special prosecutor, the lead investigator on that case was Ron Yauger of the Chicago
Yauger.
Police
How
Department.
do you spell that name?
Yawger.
And what's his pension?
So he initially, so as soon as that case went cold, he retired from the Chicago Police Department on a $64,000 a year pension.
And he was the lead investigator of this crime that occurred, well, that's alleged to have occurred, involuntary manslaughter. Is now, Mr. Vaneco's now been indicted for that.
Right,
For
he's the
something
Daily
happened-
Nephew.
And
Right.
that happened in 2004. And you know, the state's attorney's office and the other people and the police, they did their damnedest, but they couldn't find anything. Dan Webb came in as the special prosecutor.
8 years later.
In 6 months, and he's indicted him.
That's true.
It's amazing, isn't that? I'm sure, you know, somebody must have handed the evidence to Dan Webb. And the state's attorney's office, Anita Alvarez, and her predecessors, why was she so defensive? She wasn't even there in 2004. Who was there? Devine? Dick Devine?
So this lead investigator, he ran the lineup, couldn't find the surveillance video. He was in charge of the evidence cards that had scratch outs on them. He was in charge of the witnesses on the case. As soon as the case goes cold, he retires from the Chicago Police Department. He's immediately, within a couple weeks, rehired by the top law enforcement officer in Illinois, Attorney General Lisa Madigan. And we prove on the portal at openthebooks.com that over the next 3 years, she spikes his salary by 32%. It's off scale, and it's above what she paid all the rest of the union members.
Folks, I just want you to look at that. Let's see if we can get that list of people who may be running for governor of the state of Illinois in 2014, those candidates in the Republican primary. Can we get that graphic up?
So when I talk about...
So let me just say, so Bill Brady's been here. Thank you, Bill, for coming here. Senator Dillard would like to have you. We're talking. Please come over here. Want to make sure you get your say in. Treasurer Rutherford, we've been talking. We want to have you here. Bruce Rauner, he's not been in the public eye so much. Congressman Schock, we'd like to see you. Adam's here. Thank you so much for coming, Adam.
Happy holidays and happy
speak as the
Hanukkah and Merry Christmas,
We'll
Jeff.
continue to speak
Merry
as the-
Christmas to the listening audience as well.
There we go. And Dan Proft, we'll have him back. And Anna Devlantis, I think, is the dark horse. Really, seriously. I think, Anna, you should give it some thought. You'd be the only female in the race. You're one of the 50 prettiest women. I've seen that somewhere here in Chicago. Look, TV and politics, they're visual media, okay? Look, I try my damnedest. Like, I go over to Teddy Kosov, you know, their spa and salon, get a makeup application, get styling, you know, there's styling, there's color, there's nails. We thank Teddy Kosov as an underwriter. We thank the bookstall in Winnetka. Look at the great books that you can get there at the bookstall, and helps me be more informed. We thank all of our underwriters for helping to make this show possible, but mostly we thank Adam Andrzejewski for coming
you very
here.
much.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Yeah, thanks
Good
for
luck
having me on
in
the
your
show.
endeavors, which may include a run for governor. Seriously, it may include a run for state comptroller, statewide office. Or you may just sit back and be the gadfly reformer that you've been. And I say that.
I wouldn't say gadfly reformer.
Well, it's
Right.
meant as a complimentary
Thank you,
term. You're in control. Nobody's controlling you
We're
but the taxpayers.
fighting on behalf of the taxpayer.
Right.
Absolutely.
Nobody's telling you what to
Right.
do. Who's telling Lisa Madigan and Comptroller Topinka what to do? Seriously. I mean, is it a combine there? I mean, you made the case. Why wouldn't they release the information? Lisa, come on the show and explain it. We're fair, we're balanced, you know. Look, you can always watch the show. If you miss it on cable, you can see it on youtube.com/Public Affairs TV. And you can often find it right before the show. And you can find us in Chicago and Rockford and Aurora and 34 metro suburbs and often around the state of Illinois and the Illinois Channel. So come on, folks. The people who are running for governor in the Republican primary, you should be here, okay?
I appreciate